Welcome to Skytech-Lens. On August 30th, 2025, the United States abruptly halted all oil shipments to Canada, shattering decades of energy partnership overnight. The Trump administration framed the move as a strategic redirection, prioritizing American interests and new global partners. Simultaneously, Washington imposed a 10% tariff on all Canadian oil and gas exports, compounding the blow. The seamless flow of energy that once defined North American stability was weaponized in a single day. Prime Minister Mark Carney called the move reckless, but Canada was left scrambling in the dark. This was the climax of months of escalating trade tensions, including earlier sweeping tariffs on Canadian goods. The message from Washington was clear: comply with our demands or face economic ruin. The intricate web of pipelines binding the two nations became a tool of coercion. For millions of Canadians, the long, cold winter of 2025 arrived early, ushering in a chilling new economic reality. The fallout from America's energy blockade was swift and severe. Gasoline prices in cities like Toronto and Montreal soared by over 18%, while diesel jumped 23%, hitting commuters and businesses hard. The Toronto Stock Exchange plunged nearly 4% in a day, and economists warned of a $12 billion economic contraction by year's end. Unemployment was projected to spike by up to 2%, threatening hundreds of thousands of jobs. Small businesses, already reeling from earlier tariffs, now faced crippling energy costs and shrinking export orders. Supply chains ground to a halt as just-in-time deliveries from the U.S. dried up. The crisis exposed the fragility of Canada's economic structure, pushing the country toward a deep recession. On the ground, America's strategic redirection looked more like economic demolition. The spark for this trade war wasn't oil, it was digital. Canada's new digital services tax, targeting tech giants like Google and Amazon, was meant to ensure fair taxation. Washington saw it as a direct attack on American companies and retaliated with steep tariffs on Canadian exports. President Trump threatened even harsher penalties unless Canada scrapped the tax. The dispute quickly escalated from a policy disagreement to a raw power struggle, with oil as the ultimate weapon. The pipeline crisis was less about energy and more about punishing Canada for asserting digital sovereignty. The crisis exposed Canada's dangerous dependence on the U.S. for both energy imports and exports. Over half of Canada's refined petroleum comes from American refineries, and 97% of its oil exports go south. The entire energy infrastructure was built for U.S. demand, leaving Canada with few alternatives when the taps were turned off. Decades of policy complacency left the country without east-west pipelines or diversified markets. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, once a symbol of integration, now gave Washington immense leverage. When the U.S. changed the rules, Canada had little room to maneuver. The lesson was clear: over-reliance on a single partner is a recipe for vulnerability. Behind the headlines, Canadians faced real hardship. Jaspreet Singh, a truck driver, saw fuel costs double, threatening his livelihood and the affordability of groceries. Small business owner Sarah Chen struggled with soaring energy bills and the loss of American clients, putting her employees' jobs at risk. On Alberta farms, diesel prices made basic operations nearly impossible, endangering family farms. "We feel powerless, caught between two governments fighting a war that has nothing to do with us," said one farmer. Social media campaigns like Buy Canadian and Boycott USA reflected a nation's frustration and resolve. Polls showed overwhelming support for reducing U.S. dependence. The crisis forged a new national consciousness, defined by a desire for economic independence. For many, survival became a daily struggle. The pipeline dispute was no longer just politics, it was personal. The crisis fractured Canada's political landscape. Prime Minister Carney's attempt to de-escalate by scaling back counter-tariffs was condemned as surrender, sending his approval ratings plummeting. Opposition leaders demanded tougher action, while provinces clashed over the best response. Ontario's premier called for steep tariffs to protect manufacturing, while Alberta's premier floated nationalizing energy infrastructure. Regional interests collided, making a unified national response impossible. The dispute deepened old divisions, turning a trade crisis into a test of Canadian federalism. The pipeline standoff became a catalyst for a profound national identity crisis. As Canada reeled, the U.S. capitalized. America signed massive energy deals with Europe and Japan, rerouting oil once destined for Canada to new, lucrative markets. These agreements boosted U.S. exports, created jobs, and strengthened American influence abroad. Europe and Japan secured reliable energy supplies, turning Canada's loss into their gain. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce acknowledged short-term pain but celebrated long-term profits. The crisis was a masterclass in geopolitical hardball. While Canada assumed its special relationship was unbreakable, others were eager to take its place. Hopes for a Canada-Mexico alliance against U.S. pressure quickly faded. Their economies were only modestly linked and both were overwhelmingly dependent on the U.S. The Trump administration exploited this, offering Mexico a temporary tariff reprieve while hitting Canada hard. Mexico chose self-preservation over solidarity, leaving Canada isolated. The episode revealed America's structural power in North America. Divide-and-conquer tactics ensured no united opposition could form. Canada faced the full force of U.S. trade actions alone, a sobering lesson in realpolitik. The crisis forced Canada to rethink its future. With the U.S. no longer a reliable partner, the government fast-tracked efforts to diversify export markets. The expanded Trans Mountain Pipeline became a strategic lifeline with new deals signed in Asia. Calls grew for investment in domestic energy security and infrastructure, including east-west pipelines. The era of complacency was over. Economic sovereignty became a national priority. Canada's leaders faced a stark choice: adapt or remain vulnerable. The special relationship with the U.S. could no longer be the foundation of policy. The crisis of 2025 was a painful wake-up call, one Canada could not afford to ignore. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more updates.